Okay, so today we're going to deep dive into something pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah.
It's something that happens to every family eventually,
Yeah.
but it doesn't always get talked about a whole lot. And I think people don't really realize how big of a change it really is. And that's when the kids leave home.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. And it's something that every couple is going to face at some point.
Yeah.
And it really does kind of fundamentally change the dynamic of a relationship,
Right.
a family.
Yeah. So we've been doing a bunch of research into it, and we've got some really interesting stuff
Yeah. Tons of
to
research.
share today.
Lots to unpack.
Yeah. So I guess first of all, like maybe just to get started, like what actually happens to a couple when their kids move out?
Well, it can be a really, like you said, it's a big transition and it can be a really emotional time for a lot of couples.
Yeah.
You spend so many years focused on raising your children and then all of a sudden they're gone
Right.
and you're kind of left with this like void in your life. And a lot of couples experience what's called empty nest syndrome.
Right. Yeah. And so I guess that brings us to empty nest syndrome then. Like what actually is it?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think it's just like missing the kids, but it sounds like there's a lot more to it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There's a lot more to it than just missing the kids. It can manifest in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
Some people experience like a deep sense of sadness and loneliness.
Okay.
They've lost their purpose in a way because they've been so focused on being a parent
Yeah.
for for so long.
Right.
Other people experience anxiety. They're worried about their kids out in the world on their own.
Sure.
And then some people feel a sense of freedom.
Oh, okay.
They finally have the time and space to do the things that they've always wanted to do.
Right.
So it can really be a mix of all of these different emotions.
So it can be very different for different people.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I guess the other thing too is it's probably different for each person within the couple as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Right.
One partner might be really struggling with empty nest syndrome,
Yeah.
while the other partner is like, ready to move on to the next chapter.
Yeah.
And that can create some tension in the relationship.
Absolutely. So I guess now we've kind of defined empty nest syndrome.
Yeah.
Maybe we can get into like how it affects the relationship between the partners.
Sure.
Like how does this change in the family dynamic actually affect the couple?
Well, I think one of the biggest things is that it can really force you to kind of rediscover your partner.
Okay.
You've been so focused on being parents for so long that you may have kind of lost sight of who you are as a couple.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And so this is a chance to kind of reconnect and rediscover
Right.
those things that you enjoyed doing together.
Yeah, like before you had kids.
Yeah.
So date nights and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, make time for each other, go on dates,
Yeah.
travel together, all those things that you may not have had the time or the energy for when you were raising kids.
Yeah. So I guess that all sounds pretty good, like reconnecting and rediscovering each other.
Right.
Like, are there any downsides to this?
Yeah, there can definitely be downsides too.
Oh, yeah.
Couples might find that they have more time to argue now.
Yeah.
They're not spending all their time and energy on the kids.
Okay.
So they're kind of turning that attention to each other.
Right. And maybe they're realizing they disagree on more things now that they actually have time to talk.
Exactly. Yeah, and they may have different ideas about how they want to spend their free time.
Sure.
One partner might want to travel the world while the other partner wants to just stay home and relax.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things can create conflict.
Right. And like on a more serious note, I
Yeah.
guess, like, is there any research that kind of like quantifies just how much stress this can put on a relationship? Like, are there any statistics on divorce rates or anything like that?
Yeah, actually, there's a pretty interesting statistic on that. There's research that indicates a 12% increase in divorce filings among couples in the first year after their last child leaves home.
Wow. 12%.
Yeah, so it's significant.
That's a pretty big number that
Yeah.
really shows like
It is, yeah.
this is a big life change.
Yeah, it's a major transition.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about kind of the downsides and the challenges, but
Yeah.
for those couples that do manage to get through it and do manage to stay together, what are some of the good things that can come out of it?
Well, I think one of the biggest benefits is that it can be a time for a lot of personal growth.
Okay.
You have more time and space to focus on yourself.
Yeah.
You can rediscover hobbies that you may have put aside when you were raising kids.
Right.
You can pursue new interests. You can even consider career changes. And all of that can lead to a greater sense of fulfillment and happiness.
That makes sense.
And when you're feeling more fulfilled and happy as an individual,
Yeah.
that can actually strengthen your relationship.
Right. Like it's not just all about focusing on the relationship. You have to focus on yourself as well.
Exactly. Yeah, you have to be happy with yourself
Yeah.
in order to be happy in relationship.
Okay. And what about the kids? I mean, they're kind of the whole reason we're talking about all this, but like once they've moved out, how do parents kind of maintain those connections while still respecting the fact that they're adults now and they have their own lives?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the key is really communication
Okay.
and setting boundaries.
Okay.
It's important to let your kids know that you're still there for them,
Sure.
but you also need to respect their space and their independence.
Right.
You might want to agree on a regular communication schedule, like maybe you call each other once a week
Right.
or something like that.
Or text.
Yeah, or whatever works for you.
Yeah.
And it's also important to be clear about your expectations for things like financial support
Okay.
and visits. Do you expect your kids to come home for every holiday, or do you want to give them the space to create their own traditions?
Yeah.
It's really important to have those conversations up front.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess to kind of like wrap everything up, we've talked about emptiness syndrome. We've talked about the emotional challenges,
Right.
the opportunities. Like, what would you say is like the one thing that you really want people to take away from all of this?
Well, I think the most important thing is to remember that empty nest syndrome is a normal part of life.
Okay.
It's something that almost every couple goes through. And it's not a sign that your relationship is failing.
Right.
It's just a transition.
Yeah.
And it's a transition that can actually be really positive.
Okay.
It's a chance to reconnect with your partner, to rediscover yourself,
Yeah.
and to create a new chapter in your life.
I love that. Yeah. It's a new beginning, not an ending.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, I think something we didn't really touch on too much, but that's worth thinking about is that
Yeah.
all of this stuff about like reconnecting as a couple, rediscovering yourself, like that has to be a conscious effort,
It does.
right? You have to actually put in the work
Yeah.
to make those things happen.
Yeah, you can't just expect it to happen
Right.
on its own.
Yeah. And I guess that's something that our listeners can think about. Like,
Absolutely.
how are they going to approach this? How are they going to make sure that they stay connected with their partner
Yeah.
even after the kids have left home?
What are they going to do with all that free time?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess that's about all the time we have for today. So thanks so much for joining us, and we hope you enjoyed this deep dive.
It was a pleasure.
Yeah, and we'll see you next time.
See you later.
Bye.
Bye.